Welcome, everyone. We are back for week 3 with Tim Wyatt, and Everyone's Book of the Dead is our subject. Actually, it's death and dying and reincarnation and karma and ghosts. You'll see at the bottom of the screen, you'll see Firewheel Books. That is Tim's website. You can get your own copy of Everyone's Book of the Dead. I'll put a picture of it up here for you. For those of you who don't know, Tim is an esoteric author. He's written over 50 books. He's a dedicated student of Theosophy and the ancient teachings. He is just a beautiful soul. I met him when he was doing a talk on nature spirits and fairies, and absolutely fell in love with his ethos and his heart. And he's been with us for a 4-week series here in October to talk about death. Not everybody likes to talk about death, but I love to talk about it with Tim. So I'm grateful to have him here. This is week 3. We'll be covering today reincarnation and karma. Welcome back, Tim.
Thank you very much, Anne. Good to be here as always.
We touched on it a little bit about how many times people come back. And is this the first time on Earth? Is Earth the only place that we are incarnating into? Let's just talk a little bit about how these two things go hand in hand.
First of all, you have to ask what the purpose of life is. A big question, I know, but the purpose of life, we'll generally say, is for any entity, whether it's a rock or a human being or something celestial, to continue evolving and becoming something greater than it already is. In order to do that, in order to pursue this cyclic evolution, it has to itself go through cycles of birth, growth, maturity, decline, physical death, period of rest in between. That's true for everything. Mm-hmm. And so one life would never be enough to learn anything at all. We need countless, hundreds, thousands of lives on this planet and very possibly on other planets too, in order to complete our evolutionary cycle. Some people choose to speed this up by some sort of alchemical process to accelerate one's own evolution. But in order to have that cyclic evolution and in order to control the process of rebirth, we need another moderating principle, which is the law of cause and effect, otherwise known as the law of karma. Now, these things are understood generally very well these days, but they're also often misunderstood. Karma is a moderating principle, which is there to restore equilibrium, balance, and harmony. It's not there as something to punish or reward us as such, although it may very well appear that way sometimes.
Just to get your head around reincarnation here in the Western world, it's a little bit overwhelming. But I remember reading in one of the Theosophical texts when they said, you were the murderer, you were the murdered, you were the slave, you were the king, you've done all of these things. Can you elaborate on that a little bit for those who are thinking, oh, well, maybe for everybody else, but not for me, you know, I wasn't that, but we were.
The purpose of each life is to achieve a particular purpose and to carry out certain tasks. Many people are unaware of what these things are, but the soul sets itself goals before it incarnates. And this means that we have to go through every imaginable experience. Yes, we have been murderers, we've been paupers, we've been emperors, we've been downtrodden, we've oppressed other people. And the purpose of karma is to balance these things out. So to give a crude example, if you've been a rich and powerful person in one life, then at some point in the future, you're going to have to live in the gutter to find out what it's like from the other person's perspective. That's a very crude example, but it means that, you know, you're not constantly going to come into lives of power and privilege and prestige. Some lives are going to be miserable and short, others are going to be long and fulfilling, but it's all part of the rich fabric that you need to go through.
I remember reading that money was actually an obstacle, that the reason we don't all, if we choose our lives, that we don't choose money is because there's so much opportunity for corruption there, and that money does not always equate, and it actually doesn't equate to having a successful life. That doesn't really mean anything. It's just part of the playing pieces on the game board. Is that right?
Absolutely. Money doesn't really play any part in this, although the laws of karma may operate in a financial way in order to teach you a lesson. Say that money is absent from the equation, but because you've been a good guy in the past life doesn't mean to say, you know, you're going to have a 6-figure bank account in the next life.
That's true. And you mentioned acceleration. And that would, some of the people who have an extraordinary, just life of difficulty and suffering, is that what you mean by acceleration? Because pain is wisdom. A lot of these, they're packing in more than one lifetime into one lifetime. Is that what you mean?
Well, it has been said that suffering is some people's only spiritual teacher. Art Tolle, who said that very wisely. But the idea is that, you come into a particular life, and that life has been molded by everything you've done, everything you've said, and even everything you've thought in previous lives, which is why, and I'm going to get a bit controversial here, we talk a lot in the Western world at the moment, particularly in the media, of which you and I have been part. We love victims, people who are victims of this or victims of that. The law of karma, if you interpret it widely enough, means there are no victims. Everything that happens to us, whether it, diseases that we get or circumstances find ourselves in, we've put ourselves there. There's no other higher guiding principle which has said you've got to have a horrible, miserable life, or you're going to have a wonderful time and achieve all your ambitions and fulfill all your desires. We choose our lives. We choose our parents. We choose where and when we're going to be born. And more crucially, because we are involved with other people in groups of souls, we incarnate sometimes in order to be with them to carry out certain obligations or live out some kind of karmic script that we have agreed on. Now, this is going to come as very surprising to a lot of people, but we do come over again and again with the same souls who have different relationships: father, mother, friend, business partner, bitter enemy. It can be anything. The script changes all the time.
What can I learn from this? A lot of times when we have difficulties, we want to say, oh, it shouldn't have happened because I'm innocent and they're horrible. But perhaps if we looked at these difficulties that seem absolutely catastrophic and unfair, we could look at them and say, what can I learn from this? And possibly think back somewhere else. We have caused the same to take place, and we could actually learn from it. I think that's really difficult because people want to say, I am innocent. I wouldn't deserve that. Why are these small children being, murdered and tortured? That's not okay. And of course you do get that. How would you explain that to someone?
Well, you have to understand it in terms of responsibility. It may be that a child who dies at a few hours or a few days old, it's not about the child, it's about the effect on the parents of that child. It's about taking responsibility for everything we do, because we now, with our actions and our thoughts and our emotions and everything else, are effectively shaping our next life. Although there will be karmic things which we still have to live out from previous lives, which have not been activated in the current life we're living right now.
It is the ultimate law of equilibrium and balance. So it's not a punishment. It is a swing. If it swings this way, it's going to swing that way. And I remember reading as well that everything you've ever caused another human being to experience, every nasty thought and every good thought and good deed, will be experienced by you in a physical body. And we've talked about this before, which is how amazing would that be if we all understood that? Just imagine how we would behave ourselves if we truly understood it. That is invaluable. What would you say to those who are thinking, oh, that's not true? Seriously, how would you get them to listen, heed this lesson?
Well, if you want to stop suffering, and if you want to get to a place that's better than the place you're in, then you have to accept that there are certain universal laws. And those laws are all about this cyclic evolution I talk about. And either you buy into that or you don't. If you think the universe is just a random, purposeless accident which has happened through something called the Big Bang, and if you think there is no structure or no grand plan for this, then you're free to do that. But I think the universe is a very ordered place. We are higher intelligences in that universe, and we have to cooperate with that order and understand it. And once we do start to understand it and take responsibility and change our moral stance on things, then we can start to evolve much more quickly.
For a long time, the Western world, still probably, the church for some reason, doesn't want us to know about reincarnation. The East, they still had reincarnation, but here in the Western world, it's kind of, it's frowned on and you're looked at like, yeah, you're crazy. But how would you explain, maybe possibly because we're talking to each other now, we have the internet and we can find out other things, go to different cultures. Do you think it's opening up in the West? Do you think that this is coming back as an accepted way of being that we recycle?
Absolutely, there's a paradigm shift going on. I mean, we've got to remember that Christianity did preach reincarnation up to the 6th century, Council of Nicaea in 553 AD. But yes, there has been a sea change. If you ask people, say after the Second World War, 75 years ago, do you, in the West, in Europe, in America, do you believe in reincarnation? It probably would have been 1% of people who would maybe read a few Eastern texts and everything. Now, when reputable polling companies ask people questions, between a quarter and a third of people believe reincarnation, including a lot of Christians. And amongst those, many Catholics are now starting to believe notions of reincarnation, which is very interesting. In fact, in one survey, more people believed in reincarnation than believed in God.
I love that. I still get a lot of people looking at me like, oh, she's a little cuckoo. If you say anything from before, there's always a bigger picture. Just think of what we could do with mental health. If we could look at these things, I don't know why that person's behaving that way, blah, 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 or even whatever. I'm positive if we looked at the bigger picture, we would understand there's a reason why they're like that. Like phobias. I think we're going to talk some about that in next week's episode.
Yes.
Phobias and fears and Siamese twins and things like that. They're like, why is that happening? Well, imagine if you're only seeing a tiny bit of the bigger picture. The bigger picture is huge and there's so much more to it. What would you say to that?
Well, you have to convince people. I mean, one of the funniest things I heard, I think it was Woody Allen who said that I didn't believe in reincarnation in my last life, and I don't believe it in this one. You know, but it is still looked on by materialist people as being a bit of a weird and slightly odd thing to believe. You know, and they always say, you know, where is the evidence for reincarnation? We'll talk about that in the future. You know, they're asking you to bring physical evidence about something that is essentially a non-physical process, which is an absurdity, because much of your existence as a human being is spent on the inner planes. Only a small part of your existence as a soul takes place in a human body. The rest, you know, non-physical realms. Now, getting that idea to people is very difficult. The Christian view is that, yes, something does survive physical death, and the soul goes off to hell or to some kind of celestial waiting room for some unnamed event that's going to happen in the future, and they maybe get liberated. But in the meantime, they can, you know, dance the night away with Jesus or whoever they want to. You know, the notions of heaven of the Christian church are just so vague and so absurd. You wonder why intelligent people believe in them.
I wonder if it's fear of having to actually answer for your behavior, that people just don't want to hear it, saying, I can't think about that because then that means that I didn't get away with anything. And no one gets away with murder. That's why sometimes when people, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, leave it to me. It'll be balanced out. This universal law does balance it out. So I think it would be frightening for these people who have big, you know, huge control, lots of money and all that, to think that they've got to start over again and answer for everything that they said and everything that they did, everything they thought. That would be a terrifying way to have to come to learn your lessons, right?
But everybody's going to learn these lessons, because everybody is, as we discussed last week, going to wind up on the astral plane, which is a place of, it's a kind of judgment. It's a place where you get purified of a lot of your nastiness and unpleasant tendencies. And so it is a kind of day of judgment, not in the way that Christians mean it, but you have to answer for what you've done. You know, the Egyptians had this thing, Mart, who used to weigh people's souls with a feather to see whether they were purified. So the law of karma is an unerring law, and it's never wrong. And we think we can get away with things, but you get away with nothing, because if you're not punished in this life, or you're not corrected in this life, things are going to happen in the next life or the one after that to restore that balance we talked about earlier on.
So powerful. That is the most powerful peacekeeper. That is the one thing I'd love for you, if you're watching this far, to take with you. This is a series we're doing on death, reincarnation, karma, and next week we'll be talking about the evidence of reincarnation, the children who come back with the proof, their parents take them to the house that they describe, and there's actual proof now because we're in the digital world. We're talking with Tim Wyatt, an esoteric author of over 50 books, a die-hard theosophist and student of the ancient teachings. You're looking at his book up there in the corner. That is Everyone's Book of the Dead. If you'd like to learn more, there's a chance for you to grab that if you wish over at Firewheel Books. I'll include that link both here on the screen and down below in the show notes. So next week, again, evidence of reincarnation, and we're going to be able to get a chance to talk about what are ghosts. That's the one thing, Tim, I don't understand why people love the fear, love the thrill, but don't want to know what it is they're looking at. We're going to be able to talk about that with you. Do you have anything to tease them a little bit about what are ghosts? Just a little tease.
Well, there certainly is such an awful lot of interest, and always has been, I suppose. But you look on the television and it's got programs about paranormal ghost hunters, people going to haunted castles and all sorts of stuff on both sides of the pond in America and certainly here in the UK. So there's a huge amount of interest in this. And also now they have the technology to be able to film in darkened rooms and everything, which was not possible before. So people do have a morbid fascination with this sort of thing, probably for all the wrong reasons, I have to say.
I find it comforting. I find ghosts comforting because even just listening to the stories, that means there's something beyond the physical. But I do know that they love the thrill, but they'll bail out of there and there's never any answer. They don't ever play it all out. Who was that? What was that? How am I playing in this energy? They do go, oh, there's a message from my grandmother and it's for me. We personalize it. I think it'd be fantastic if we actually took a look at what it is we're experiencing, this energy force, this whatever is happening there. There's more to it than just a little cheap thrill.
Yes, and also we can perhaps mention, the spiritualist churches and how they play into it and what is actually going on in spiritualist churches.
Yes, please. The mediums. You want to talk about that? The mediums? Oh, yes, please. That is next week right here on the Living Theosophy channel. It is an honor to have you, Tim. We could talk to you for hours. Once again, please pick up the text. It is fantastic. It's everyone's Book of the Dead because the Egyptians have a book and the Buddhists have a book. But now Tim has written this for you. This is everyone's Book of the Dead. Firewheel Books. Thank you so much, Tim Wyatt. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Anne. I look forward to that very much.